those of you who were there, Sarah was one of the main organizers with that, with us. So thank you to this congregation, to Rabbi Kat and everyone who creates a space like this. This is the first time I've brought my son to a synagogue, and I think it's because I think it's the Torah with a kafiyah, and that we are holding a space in which we lift up the parts of our tradition, the parts of Jewish history that really serve collective liberation, and first and foremost, the liberation of Palestine. And I just am grateful to be celebrating this very important day in our tradition, where we really reckon with what is in the way and what prevents the collective from entering in the book of life. And in 2009, I met someone named Hayo Meir, and Hayo is a German survivor of Auschwitz who was part of the resistance in the Netherlands, and there was an agent who infiltrated the resistance, and he ended up in Auschwitz. And in 2010 and 2011, with American Muslims for Palestine, the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network organized a 14-city tour across Europe, and then another tour across Canada and the United States, in which Hayo spoke with other survivors, other people whose ancestors had survived or perished in genocide. And that's where Never Again for Anyone became popularized. And Hayo at that time spoke, this was in 2010, about what he saw in the parallels between what was happening then on the ground in Gaza and what he experienced in the lead up to what became the final solution. And Hayo has since passed, but our commitment to really making true on Never Again for Anyone remains more urgent than ever, as we all know. And so I want to talk a little bit about our commitment to rejoining our path with the rest of humanity and to wrestle it away from the way that Zionism separates us from the rest of humanity. What Hayo made was a choice. He chose something so different than the way that Zionism exploited his history. Not only exploited, but had so much disdain for those who perished and actually survived the Nazi genocide. And though they steal from the history of resistance, Merrick Edelman, who was a fighter with the Warsaw Ghetto Resistance, said that our resistance, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, belongs to Palestine. And it's in that spirit that we're here today, and that we stand with the ways that Palestinians continue to resist and fight for their self-determination. And so, I know we all know this, but it has never been more true that at this moment in history, Jewish people have to make a choice. The choice is clear, and there isn't a middle ground, right? At other moments in history, Jewish people have also made choices. They have chosen to stand for ourselves and with other oppressed people, or they have chosen the false safety of aligning with dominant power. And that has happened again and again in history. The stakes are very high right now. And so we're either with fascism or we are against it. We are with trans and queer liberation or we are against it. We are with xenophobia or we stand for the freedom of movement and the freedom of families to be together. There isn't a middle ground, and we know there's not a middle ground. So we have a long history we can stand on, right, of Jewish participation in our own and in collective liberation. from Hayo and other armed resistance to the Nazi genocide, to the long history of Jewish participation in worker struggles and in socialist struggles against monarchies, to Jewish participation in the South African anti-apartheid struggle, not only in boycott, divestment, and sanctions, but also in the armed part of that struggle before it became BDS. Jewish people were part of the civil rights struggle and gave their lives for that struggle. So how are we now taking action in solidarity with the choices that Palestinians are making for self-determination? How are we doing the same for the choices of immigrants, of transgender people, of queer families, of the Black liberation movement, indigenous nations for their own self-determination and liberation? One thing I feel like we have to wrestle with is Jewish self-referentialism. Jewish self-referentialism. We do not set the terms of the struggle for Palestinian liberation. That is their own. We are part of the world that we are trying to create that both makes possible and will be made possible by Palestinian liberation and self-determination. So I want to talk a little bit about what it takes from each of us, and I wanted to read something from David Adler. Maybe some of you saw this. David Adler is on the boat to Gaza. I'm just going to have to pull it up again because Instagram does this thing where it loses loads of bunch of other things. So as people have spoken to, David Adler is one of many people on the flotillas that are trying to break through and bring aid into Gaza. Right now, as we speak, we know most of those boats have been intercepted by the Israeli regime, by the Zionist regime. We also know there are 45 boats leaving from Turkey in solidarity with the flotilla boats. And we know that the resistance continues to strike back against what is being presented by this government as another Oslo, meaning another false peace plan that is intended to dismantle Palestinian self-determination and turn Gaza into a retirement and vacation resort, in which, of course, Trump is going to profit as a real estate mogul. I want to read this from David Adler because I think it speaks to the choice we're all making. Greetings from Global Samud Flotilla as we make our final approach to Gaza. Today I am writing a very personal letter to you all, a letter about what it means to be Jewish on a mission that is set to arrive to the Red Zone during Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. I almost never write as a Jew. I share the exhaustion of being forced to put Jewish feelings first when a genocide has been committed in the name of Zionist national interest, and when activists have been detained, tortured, and deported in the name of our safety. But today I felt compelled to write in that register as one of the only Jews on this mission, which brings together over 500 people from more than 20 countries around the world. I believe the timing of our flotilla is not coincidental. On the contrary, I believe it is a blessing that we are approaching interception at the onset of Yom Kippur, our annual Day of Atonement, which calls on us to reflect on our sins and what can be done to repair them in the spirit of Tikkun Olam. How can we atone for what has been committed in our name? How can we seek forgiveness for sins that multiply by the hour? As bombs and bullets rain on Gaza, how could we possibly take seriously our mandate to heal the world when the state of Israel is so determined to destroy it? If there is any part of the Torah that I still remember, it is this obligation to bestow upon us justice, justice you shall pursue. Tzedek, tzedek, Torah. How could we stand by while the state of Israel perverts this holy obligation overseeing a Holocaust of the Palestinian people? I joined this flotilla just like any other delegate to defend humanity before it is too late. But on Yom Kippur, I am reminded that I am also here because my Jewish heritage demands it. As a mere adolescent, my grandfather, Jacques Adler, joined the Parisian resistance against the Nazis, putting his life on the line to sabotage their operations, even as his friends and family were sent to their deaths in concentration camps. That is the tradition to which I am called, and the definition of justice that feels true to my Jewish identity, as the same genocidal rage that targeted my ancestor is now taken up by its principal victims. So I think most of us know what we will choose. And it's not just solidarity, it is also us who are in a joint struggle for collective liberation. We all know we are literally in a struggle for survival, not just of humanity and humanness, but of the planet itself and all life on the planet. And what Israel is doing with the US support in Gaza is a warning, and it's an attempt to desensitize us. And so this moment of reflection and recommitting and allowing ourselves to feel both the devastation of this moment and how much power lies in it. Because I agree with you, Kat, we are not the minority, we are the majority. And those of us who chose to participate in joint struggle for collective liberation are part of that majority. And our enemies are formidable. And they have advanced an agenda that is the greatest threat that humanity on this planet has faced. And yet, we have a tremendous amount of power in our determination and in our numbers. And it will require action that comes out of this reflection and commitment, and it's going to require sacrifice. And we're not, of course, just facing and committed to the dismantling of Zionism and the state of Israel so that something else can come. We are also in the midst of the fall of this American empire. And that is necessary, and it will be brutal. And like Israel, the U.S. will take as many people down with it as it can. And of course, in this country, it will try to take down the most vulnerable. But what else will happen is more and more and more of us will have a reason to get out of our comfort and get out of accepting the very limited world we are being offered right now. And in that, all of us will be surrounded by and able to stand on a tremendous power. And I think in that, we can then actually have a book of life. And I think there isn't one possible right now, because Zionism is filling it with so much death. But I want to just close with something all of us, I think many of us are familiar with in terms of Arundhati, something that Arundhati Roy wrote. That in the dismantling of Zionism in Israel and the fall of the US empire, that another world is possible, and if we listen quietly, she is breathing. And we have to be the oxygen mask until the air is clean, and we have to create the soil that allows for that world to come forward. And I'm grateful to be doing that with you, with this congregation, with so many of us. There's a growing number of Jews who are defecting from Zionism. They have to. There is only one choice, and we are making it. And we are also part of global movements for people's rights and basic needs, and that fight is getting very clear. And thank you, and wishing us all a different year, and that may this time next year Palestine be free.